Hello everybody, and welcome to this episode of Fallout 4, Alien Blaster Only. This episode is basically just heading up to Sanctuary and Red Rocket, scrapping everything, and cranking it down into experience for leveling. So yeah, now, in the previous two episodes I was talking about a video that H-Bomber Guy did about Fallout 3, about the many things he didn't like about the game, and I was like relating that to things about this game which are good or potentially not so good. I guess one thing that goes without saying is that I do enjoy this game. Like, I quite enjoy playing this game. I just, you know, I feel like this is less of a role-playing game and more of a first-person shooter. And the first-person shooter parts, it gets well, like, you know, first-person shooter plus wacky baseball batty parts.
Good, you're back.
You know, that part of the game, which is the main part, is something that I do quite enjoy. And
Paladin Dance is one hell of a squad leader. I don't know what
I also do quite enjoy solving the game's the combat challenges that the game presents with the wacky and weird weapons like the Alien Blaster, for example. But I guess one thing I could talk about would be means by which, you know, changes that could be made to this game that would make it better. Now, this is something that I do talk about a fair bit. Like, I'll notice something and then I'll say, oh, they could have done Y instead of X. But yeah, now in terms of making the game better, like, it's, you know, basically around giving more options and, like, you know, yeah, like, I don't know if a gameplay change is necessarily a problem in itself.
I can see will finish rotten in hell. I'll take a look. Sure, it's all worth.
But still, like, for example, beyond the perks that get unlocked, the special points don't really matter that much. And that's because they... I mean, here's the power armor. Basically, for example, strength is probably the biggest one, because at every point gives you plus 10 carry weight, which is non-negligible. But, like, perception gives 3% boost per point in VATS accuracy. Charisma gets a small amount of better effectiveness. Int gives plus 3% XP gain per point. Oh, and here I find some resources. Yeah, so anyway, like, for example, you know, something that I do sometimes mention is stat checks. Just like the stat checks that exist when you do the last voyage of the USS Constitution quest, there are certain parts where you can skip parts of the quest by using your stats, like or just your intelligence. And in the Far Harbor add-on, there's also parts where you can use intelligence or perception to do certain things in certain areas. And there are cases where that would make sense here as well. Like, for example, environment-based ones might be
That's over.
rather than having to hack a computer, maybe you have to fix some object, and so that would be like an int check or something. What are some examples? Like the way the quests in this game are laid out, opportunities for such things don't immediately arise.
Loctite.
Yeah, nothing's coming to mind. Like perhaps perhaps stat checks could be used like instead of lockpicking or hacking, potentially. Like maybe rather than unlocking a door, no. Okay, it doesn't work as much with lockpicking, but maybe with hacking, if you're like hacking to open a door, maybe with int you can find a way well, I guess if you were to try to like actually pry open the terminal to hotwire it, that's like hacking, I guess, but like hardware hacking, maybe. So not as good of an example. I don't know, but like certainly with speech, having your different stats have specific impacts could potentially make sense. Like for example, int checks. You know, if your character has the opportunity to say something smart, then perhaps that could be an int check. And for example, if like when you very first meet Cabot, for example, perhaps when he asks you what do you think about aliens, if you have above a certain int level, perhaps you tell him about some fact that demonstrates that there must be aliens somewhere. Right, like this is already a speech option, like the universe is so big there must be aliens. Perhaps if you have a high level of int, you get like, yeah, whoa, this is an int check. And you say something like, I don't know, if you apply the Drake equation, then no matter how much of a pessimist you are, there's always aliens somewhere in the universe, for example. And then
Yes.
like Cabot is wowed by your intelligence there, and so he he thinks more fondly of you, because you're so smart. And maybe that for example,
Nice.
changes the rewards you get. If you do the int check, he gives you a bigger reward, for example. It's also something that makes sense in the when you're talking to Dr. Duff, like, she gives you the quiz about radiation, and so it could be an int check where you say, for example, like you say something really smart about radiation, and she's like, "Whoa, I never thought about that." And perhaps it goes from a longer quiz to a shorter quiz. Perhaps she gives you a bigger reward. Perhaps, I don't know. So that would be like an int check sort of thing. And an example of a luck check would be the few times you have to guess some ID. One example is it's the General Robotics Galleria. Another example is the Boston Public Library, which, by the way, that is a 100% chance always, in my experience. So perhaps to guess it, you need to have like above 5 int, for example. And like perhaps like currently the way that these speech checks work is if it's yellow, there's a high chance, orange is medium, red is low chance. But if they were to prioritize if they were to prioritize like your stat points rather than your patience with regards to reloading over and over, you would basically like it'd be a case where it'd either be it'd be probably have the same colors, but rather than represent the chances, it would represent the threshold. So like yellow is stat 3 or higher, orange is stat 6 or higher, red is stat 10 or higher, for example. So a red speech check would require 10 charisma or higher. But on the other hand, it would also like be 100%. So like it's only based on it's only based on your stats rather than like what the dice roll is. Or perhaps one possibility is, you know, to have the same probability mechanic, but rather than for speech checks, have it be for luck checks, right? Because perhaps the point of luck is that it's supposed to make you lucky. So if luck, chance, as per the name, are reliant on chance, perhaps that would, like, it'd make more sense, possibly. Like, if you're randomly thinking of numbers, perhaps above the threshold you have 100%. For every point below, the chance halves, for example. So if the threshold is 10, at 10 you have 100%, 9 50%, 8 25%, 7 12.5%, and so on, for example. You know, and so there's always a chance, like below the threshold you still have a chance, but your luck is what decides your success there. And so, you know, perhaps an easy check would still be the library one, and that's because it's probably, oh, and this part is silent because it's, you know, a lot of noises they don't want to be hearing. Yeah, so, you know, perhaps the main character knows that the ID number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 is fairly likely to be present in the system somewhere. Right, like, I guess it would also make sense to guess 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. Yeah, so, you know, there's that, and so while you would think that guessing a 6-digit number is a 1 in a million chance, in actual fact, if you know numbers which are likelier than others, like all zeros, 1 to 6, all 7s, all 9s, 2 numbers, and then 1 9, and then 2 more numbers, or 2 numbers, 2 0, and then another 2 numbers, like a date, for example. If maybe the character remembers the mayor's birthday, and that's an ID or something. I don't know. But in that case, if you just need an ID, then perhaps you know, perhaps your odds aren't as low as you'd think, right? Whereas a really hard check might be, for example, with tradecraft. So, like, you know, maybe Ricky, the guy that you talk to at the top of the bridge, he's expecting a countersign. He says, "Where's your Geiger counter?" And then you say, "Mine is in the shop," right? Well, you know, based on his speech, he's only expecting one person. So it makes sense that you could walk up, guess the countersign, and then like leave, I guess. Leave and like do the quest without Deacon. So you go up there, you do the luck check, and it'll be like, mine is in the shop. You know, you guess that, perhaps. And I mean, I guess that's also perception. Like, luck is guessing it right. Perception is noticing that he's saying a sign and expecting a countersign. But I don't know how you would easily integrate a multi-stat check for something. But that would lead to an interesting situation where you successfully guess the countersign, you get yourself in, you know, then he tells you where to go. You go in, you go through, you kill all the synths. Maybe with a hacking thing. Perhaps, you know, because there's in the Tradecraft dungeon itself, there's a terminal in there that only Deacon can hack. Right? Like, if you're there on your own, you can't hack it. So you can't get in. You know, either that would just be like a high level terminal, for example. Oh yeah, and 6 levels. 6 levels here from that. The perks shown here for that. So yeah. Yeah, so like it'd just be a regular terminal, or you would have some other way of getting in. So you get in, you pick up the prototype, and then sometime later you have the option of selling it to the Brotherhood of Steel or something. You know, if you ally with them, and then that, like, you know, then you're locked out of Tradecraft. But until you tell the Railroad about it, you're not hostile with them or something like that. Or you could go to the Railroad, talk to them. Deacon gives you his quest. He's like, we're going to go here, do this, get the thing, and then perhaps you could then say, that place, oh, I've already been there. He's like, you have? I'm like, I have. I also found this. He's like, how do you get through all that? You'll need the countersign to do that. And, you know, perhaps the Railroad are like ridiculously impressed or something if you do that. Maybe, I don't know. I think, you know, the idea of guessing the countersign there was more for humor, but like, yeah, so oh, actually surprisingly close to the end. Still like 5 minutes. I mean, there's options like that, for example. And I don't think... I think that would probably make at least make the game a little bit more difficult, because normally you can just rely on luck for that stuff. like luck and patience. But like, say you need you know, let's say you're presented with a red speech check, right? You need 10 charisma to pass it 100% of the time. This red speech check, say, allows you to skip a really big fight, for example. In this game, you could try over and over with that speech check, even if you had charisma 1. In fact, no matter how low your charisma is, you always have a chance to pass. But with a change that I'm thinking of, that obviously, because I'm not a dev, I can't implement it, but, you know, if it was implemented, it would actually make the game at least a bit more difficult, because, for one, you'd have more stats to think about with speech checks. But also, unless the stat is above the threshold, you ain't gonna succeed in that statement. That's just not gonna happen. So it means that you can't rely on luck to essentially bypass all speech checks, or in survival mode, all speech checks that you can easily bypass without having to like walk a long distance to a bed to save, for example. But like, you know, still stands like even survival mode, in theory, you could pass any speech check with luck. Like with repeating it over and over, reloading and reloading until you eventually succeed. If it was just purely based on the stats and not based on luck, then yeah, you would either need to get your stats high enough, or you would have to yeah, or you would have to do without. Oh, and here I'm just moving extra resources. Yeah, what else is there? I mean, I guess talking about difficulty change with implementing these things, like it probably makes sense to consider, for the sake of not being cheaty, that basically the change should only be designed such that it makes the game harder. So, for example, H-Bomber talks about the compass and how that just trivially leads you to your destination. Well, if a change was to remove the compass entirely, that would make the game harder. So, like, it'd be something that would be, say, okay to use in a challenge, for example. Whereas, you know, if the only change made was that sometimes bullets hit vital things and occasionally enemies die instantly, that would make the game easier. And so, not as justifiable in challenge runs and the like. You know, if these changes were to be implemented in a mod or something. So yeah, but like removing the compass would require a lot of other changes for new players that don't necessarily know their way around. But that's all that, I guess. Thanks everybody for watching, and I will see you in the next episode. Bye bye.